so I think that's a good sign. Started with our preliminaries. I think there's one. We definitely have a quorum. I think we have one other commissioner who will jump on. And I would ask Director Tuttle to. I will call to order this meeting of Monday, August 11th of the City of Madison Plan Commission. I ask Director Tuttle to call the roll.
Okay, Alder Field.
I'm here.
Alder Glenn.
Here.
Alder Ugair.
Here.
Commissioner Bazine.
Here.
Commissioner Heck.
Here.
Commissioner McCahill.
Here.
Commissioner Sanders.
Here.
Commissioner Solheim. Looks like he's not present. Alternate Wisniewski. Chair Gnam.
Here.
And School District Rep Soldner is not present.
Thanks. We will start with some technical information about our meeting from Facilitator Poole.
All right, and welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After all registrants speak, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jesse. I would just note, Director Tuttle, that Commissioner Solheim has joined us, so we have a full roster. And we will start right away with agenda item 1, which is our time for public comment regarding items not on our formal agenda tonight. Director Tuttle, do we have any registrants for item 1?
No, Chair, there is nobody registered for this item.
Okay, great. So next we'll go to disclosures and recusals. Members of the Plan Commission should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do any commissioners have disclosures or recusals related to tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to approving the minutes for our last meeting on July 28th, 2025. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes that commissioners would like to request at this time? And if not, could I ask for a motion to approve the July 28th minutes and a second? Alder Uguer, thank you. And Commissioner Heck, I think you got in there under the wire. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? And is there any objection to unanimous approval for our last meeting's minutes? And seeing none, we'll mark that motion as approved unanimously. Thank you. Moving right along, just to make sure our next few meetings are on your calendar. Our next meeting after tonight will be Monday, August 25th. And then we'll meet again Monday, September 15th of 2025. Those will be regular Monday at 5:30 meetings via Zoom. And then just looking a little further out, we have our next special meeting on Thursday, October 16th at 5 p.m. in room 215 of the Madison Municipal Building, which I think we've all been at before. So we look forward to seeing everybody there. So I think we'll move into our agenda. So we do have a couple of items for the consent agenda, and we are going to break up the consent agenda just a little bit and because item 4 has to be approved as part of has to be approved after a public hearing. We will take that consent agenda item by itself, although we won't do the normal discussion for something that's not on consent agenda. And then we'll do a second motion for items 5 and 6, which are referral items. So before you see the items that we have recommended for consent. And I'll read our background. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which staff members believe an application has been sufficiently reviewed to support approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and in which the applicant accepts those conditions and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to those items. The items proposed for consent agenda tonight are on your screen as we discussed, and that would be items 4, 5, and 6. So I'll pause and ask if there are any requests for separation from the commission. And seeing none, I will read the consent items into the record. So item 4 is we'll do 2 consent votes. So first we'll start with item 4, which is Legistar 88956 relating to 117 through 125 North Butler Street in Alder District 2. This is consideration of a conditional use in the Downtown Residential 2 DR2 district for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 8 units to allow construction of a 5-story, 73-unit apartment building. That is the only item on the public hearing consent agenda. So I will open the public hearing and close the public hearing for that item and move to a vote. Could I ask for a motion and a second on this consent item? Alder Field, thank you. Alder Uguer, thank you. Is there any objection to unanimous approval for item 4 as a consent item? And seeing no raised hands, we'll record that as passed unanimously. The next work on our consent agenda are items 5 and 6. These items are proposed to be referred to our next meeting on August 25th, 2025, to allow the items to be renoticed and pending review by the Urban Design Commission. So item 5 is Legistar 89078, creating section 28022-00723 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 3357 and 3359 East Washington Avenue from TRV1 Traditional Residential Varied 1 District to CC-T Commercial Corridor Transitional District. And this is in Alder District 12. And item 6, which is Legistar 88777, related to 922 through 930 North Fair Oaks Avenue and 3357 through 3375 East Washington Avenue in Alder District 12. And this is consideration of a conditional use in the proposed commercial corridor transitional CCT district and transit-oriented development overlay district for dwelling units in a mixed-use building with more than 100 units, and consideration of a conditional use in the CCT district for single-family dwelling, all to allow construction of a 5-story mixed-use building with 3,300 square feet of commercial space and 171 dwelling units, and a 2-story, 6-unit townhouse building. Since these items are proposed for referral, there is no public hearing to open and close. Megan, is that right? All right. So I'll just ask if there is a motion and a second to approve referral of these 2 items to our next meeting. Alder Uguer, thank you. Commissioner Heck, thank you. Is there any so we have a motion and a second to refer items 5 and 6. Is there any objection to unanimous approval for the motion to refer? And seeing none, we'll record those items as passed unanimously as well. So thanks. I think we're still perfecting the consent agenda to make sure that we have public hearings when we're supposed to and that we don't have public hearings when we're not supposed to. So sorry if that's a little clunky. We'll get a little smoother as we move forward. And now we will go to our regular agenda items. We only have a couple, but they make up for importance what they lack in number. And we'll start with item 2, which is Legistar 89254, amending sections 4.095, 10.05, 10.055, 10.08, 10.101, 23.24, and 1.08 paren 3 paren A, and creating section 10.105 of the Madison General Ordinances to enhance the city's street tree protection provisions and to establish a street tree replacement fund. So we will start with a presentation from our city arborist, Ian Brown. I think, Ian, this might be your first Plan Commission meeting, so welcome. And thanks for your presentation. We'll give you the floor.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair. This is my first one aside from the hey, you're new here, and introducing myself part. So, yeah, I will, I'll wait for the slides to come up and I'd be happy to work through it. So, Madison, as we know, is a community that loves trees. We have a stated 40% community canopy goal. And so that's what the focus of this series of proposed ordinance revisions are, is basically to help move us in that direction where we can be more effective at supporting the trees that we have, improving the growing conditions at the time that we're turning over those sites for new trees, and making sure that everyone at the table through the public hearing process, the development process, and the city is all on the same page and communicating transparently with the assistance of a professional forester or arborist.
Ian, you can feel free to share your screen and
I'm
go
sorry.
through the slides if you'd like.
I thought I was waiting for him to come up.
That's okay.
My mistake. Here, 1 second. I'll do that now.
Thanks.
All right. I guess you're going to have to hear my stalling spiel again.
All right. Nope, we can see it.
Okay. Excellent. Let's start the slideshow. So here we are. We're talking about tree protection improvements. And really, like, I think, like I said, this is something that the community has asked for, and what we've known for a long time is that really trees are necessary infrastructure. They return value to the community, and they're not always fully realized within the conversation of development, redevelopment, or just urban spaces. So, especially in these urban areas, downtown specifically, trees are present and in close proximity to construction and excavation. So we want to make sure that anytime that those projects are happening, that trees or a voice for trees are present to help guide that process. So this is not designed to be a prohibition type of thing. This is designed to be a let's talk about it and make sure that you have the appropriate people at the table type of thing. Unique to a lot of other situations when it comes to excavation or development, damage to trees can take decades, if ever, to recover. So, you think about, maybe a historic building too. If something were to happen and we were to lose a wall off the side of a historic building, you can't just put it back. That thing is changed forever if it ever does recover. If it were structurally unsound, it may have to be removed completely. And that's the same type of thing that can happen to these trees. So, a tree that has been there for 60, 80, 100 years, maybe this is a tree that was planted in the wake of Dutch elm disease or maybe even earlier. This tree has been a witness to a lot within our community. It's mature, it's providing canopy, that canopy is providing benefits to the entire community. And so that's where we want to make sure that a professional arborist is engaged. So the intent here is really to make sure and to improve the opportunity for forestry staff to be at the table, whether that's in a DAT meeting, whether that's outreach by a prospective developer or anyone else who's considering the work, whether that's even with city staff. So if it's an engineering project, a parks project, streets project, to make sure that forestry is at the table to help provide professional tree guidance. So we are looking to be able to provide greater protection for trees, especially the large trees. And through that same process, we are looking to improve the capacity and quality of future planting sites. And I can get into that in a little bit. So the tree protection zone currently is 5 feet distance away from the tree, regardless of the size. So for a tree that is small, maybe the size of your wrist, that 5-foot distance may be sufficient. I would argue that is wholly insufficient, for a tree that is, maybe you struggle to reach your arms around. And those large trees are the ones that we really want to focus on protecting. If we're going to move towards a 40% community canopy goal, we need to make sure that the large trees that we have are protected and maintained to the best of our ability throughout the growth process of Madison. So we actually just participated in, Madison was one of 2 communities in the state of Wisconsin that was selected for a urban forest inventory analysis study, and that was done by both the Wisconsin DNR and the USDA Forest Service. And what that showed is something that we also kind of inherently know. A small number of trees are large, but those same small number of trees provide the vast majority of the benefits. So for Madison, 10% of the trees by stem count are 15 inches or greater. Those same trees provide 53% of the leaf area, which is where we get the vast majority of our benefits. When we talk about either stormwater interception or shade, air pollution mitigation, that's all coming from canopy area. So that's where we really want to focus on trying to protect the large trees that we currently have. There is flexibility. So if you want to think of the tree protection zone or an exclusion zone, we also recognize that development happens within these spaces sometimes. So, a street might be closer than that to the tree, a sidewalk might be closer than that to a tree. What this means is that if a project is going to be breaching that zone, then they need to be talking to forestry. And then we would provide guidance on what is the appropriate protection zone, what are the appropriate protection measures, how close is too close, and we'll work through that process together. This really does kind of help to increase that halo of influence for forestry. Because like I said, currently it's 5 feet. So if anyone wants to do disturbance up to 6 feet or even 5 feet away from the tree, they can do that, and forestry is not tagged into that conversation. In practice, what that means is disturbance and excavation happens on paper up to 5 feet, but forestry staff will regularly, I guess, get called to job sites where equipment's on site, crews on site, and the statement will be, we need to get within 3 feet, and this is why. So we need you to sign off on it. And really, that could be too late for the tree, and that's far too late for forestry to really be able to provide a helpful guiding voice in a way that both supports the tree and supports the project. So we're looking to help improve that. Where does the teeth from this come from? So we also did look at the financial side of it. Is there a penalty phase? Yes, there is. We're basically at the maximum of what is allowed legally. And so to avoid having a situation where, I'll say the worst case scenario, you have someone who just says the tree's not worth it, cost of doing business, I'm going to remove the tree and write a check. That really doesn't make the community whole. And so what we're talking about doing is many of these projects also have permits. So for instance, a right-of-way occupancy permit. And so within the right-of-way occupancy permit, we have parameters that say you should follow and respect the tree protection zone. If that doesn't happen, then we could either revoke or suspend that permit, which in practice would kind of put the brakes on a project. And so we're not looking to invoke that commonly. That's just, we need to have a clause in place that we could go to make sure that everyone knows that we're serious about this. So again, what the purpose of this ordinance is to try and drive people to work with forestry on the front end, so that forestry, the project, and the community all have a transparent conversation, and we arrive at a solution ahead of time before large historic trees might be put at risk. The final piece to this is we're going to be establishing a new street tree replacement fund. So this is a dedicated fund that would be a location where if a tree is removed, a project sufficiently outlines to forestry, yes, there's absolutely no other way to do what they need to do. Forestry signs off on the tree removal. There is a financial compensation from the developer, for instance, to the city to recover the cost of that tree. Right now, those funds go to the general fund, and 100% of those funds do not circle back to forestry to support current or future canopy. What this does is that makes sure that street tree funds, street tree damage funds, street tree removal funds do go back to support street tree planting or site improvement. So in a downtown site, for instance, you may have a tree that gets removed. We're not looking to outsource that canopy to the perimeter of the community as a whole. We would be looking to try and either identify or improve a site maybe on the same block or maybe around the corner, so that we, on the whole, are supporting the neighborhood level canopy, so that we don't have areas of low canopy versus high canopy across the community. We are looking to try and have as equal canopy as we can wherever we can. So in a downtown site, that might mean we're removing a tree as a result of a project, but the developer is then also supporting and paying for something like a Silva-Cell or Green Blue Cell that's going to be installed at the end of the project. And so that, while not ideal in the short term, it definitely does improve the site in the long term. And, when we're talking 20, 30, 40 years from then, the community is at a position where we can start looking at having mature, healthy canopy that has recovered and is the result of that same project. A secondary benefit to having that specific fund set up is that we do have an opportunity for people who are interested in donating to forestry to have a specific place for their funds to go and directly support that. There have been a couple of individuals that have reached out to me since my time at the city, and they were interested in donating. And I didn't really have a place to be able to take that money and promise that 100% of it would go to trees. And so establishment of this new fund would do exactly that. So here we are with the timeline. Presented this in July to Public Works improvements, Common Council introduction on the 5th. I'm here tonight. I do have some additional speaking engagements after you all. We're going to the Sustainable Madison Committee and Finance on 8/25, Board of Public Works on 9/3, and then circle back to Council for a vote on the 16th. If this is adopted, it would be implemented January 1 of 2026. And the reason for that gap is because we want an opportunity for the city and our development partners to be able to meet and talk about what these changes mean for the upcoming construction season. So we don't want to change things in the fall. We're going to talk about it in the winter so they can appropriately ramp up for the spring. So that's all I have for you. Here I can stop sharing. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. If you could hang around, we'll do our public hearing and then we'll get back to the time for questions for you. Before we do the public hearing, I forgot to say when we did our consent agenda that items 5 and 6, because they are going to be referred to the next meeting, we would take public testimony at the next meeting on August 25th. Or if you have written comments that you want to submit on those items prior to the August 25th meeting, you can go ahead and do that. But we won't be discussing those items tonight because we pushed them to the next meeting. So I'm not sure if any registrants may be here for those items, but we'll have that discussion next time. For this item, for item 2, we do have registrants, and so we will open our public hearing. And I think we have a couple of registrants wishing to speak. So we'll stick to our 3-minute time limit to be fair to everybody. And I will ask Megan to introduce our speakers for us.
Okay, the first speaker on this item is Bill Connors, registered neither in support nor opposition, wishing to speak and representing Smart Growth Greater Madison.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the proposed tree protection ordinance. At this point, Smart Growth Greater Madison does not support or oppose this ordinance because I am early in the process of gathering feedback from our general contractor and developer members. Smart Growth does, however, object to the process. To the best of my knowledge, there was absolutely no effort to reach out to the experts on construction issues, the community of general contractors and developers who are building much of the new housing in this city, to work collaboratively on this ordinance. We would have welcomed being able to hear from the sponsors about the problem they were seeking to fix and to share ideas for how to fix the problem while minimizing added delays and costs to the housing construction in Madison. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen with this ordinance unless someone hits pause. The ordinance is likely to have more negative consequences than it needed to have as a result of this process. Some will say it is not too late because this ordinance will go to other committees in the coming weeks. It has been our experience that once an ordinance has been introduced and referred to committees for the formal committee hearing process, the ordinance is essentially set in stone. The idea of considering, for example, a completely new and different approach to fixing the problem has no chance of succeeding at that point. And my speaking at various committee meetings for 3 minutes, maybe followed by a question or two, is not even remotely like a collaborative process to achieve a really good ordinance instead of a possibly flawed ordinance. And educating contractors after enactment of the ordinance is not a collaborative process. Furthermore, the Madison City government already has inadequate staff resources to move the development review process along in a timely fashion with the many, many layers of regulations that already exist. Adding another layer of regulations might result in even longer delays in being able to obtain building permits for construction. How many weeks will contractors have to wait for a building permit because staff have not had time to measure the circumference of street trees? If a building permit can be issued before city staff measure the street trees, I would appreciate it if someone would point that out where that is in the ordinance where it explicitly says that. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, our next speaker is Sandra Ward from District 4, registered in support and wishing to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks, Sandra. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Ward, and I am co-chair with Grace Hassler of the Capital Neighborhoods Tree Protection and Planting Committee. I'm here to endorse the proposed ordinance changes in item 89-254. The changes have the potential to protect one of Madison's most important resources, our canopy trees. Thank you to our city forester, Ian Brown, for his important work on this matter. Thanks also to the mayor and the alders who are sponsoring these changes. Our future will be brighter thanks to all of you. That's it.
Thanks, Sandra.
Okay, our next registered speaker is Linda Leonards, registered in support and wishing to speak. Jesse, I don't see Linda. I don't know. Okay.
No, there's no person by that name in attendance.
We also have Jean Whitcomb from District 6, registered in support and available to answer questions, though I'll note I also do not see Jean online. We do have 7 other folks registered in support not wishing to speak, and 1 registered in opposition not wishing to speak, and those details will be posted with the agenda. That's all we have tonight for this item, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Are there questions from the commissioners for any of our registrants? And if we do see either of those other registrants pop up before, while we're in our public hearing, we'll grab them, obviously. Alder Uguer, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Mr. Connor. Do you anticipate that you'll have comments from your organization members that would give some insight into one of the later meetings with regard to specific objections or suggestions to make it a simpler process from their point of view?
Thank you for the question, Alder Uguer. Yeah, I will do my best. I'm reaching out to my folks, setting up meetings, having conversations. I hope to be able to provide, if we have any concerns, and I don't know if we do, specifics about those and suggested, revisions to see if people will consider them. But again, our experience has been that once we get into this process, it's really hard. We might be able to tweak something a little bit, but that's about it.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Other questions? All right. All right. If there are no more questions for registrants, we will close the public hearing at this time, and we will open the floor for questions of staff and I guess particularly Ian. Alder Uguer.
Thank you, Chair. Questions for City Forester Brown. A couple of questions that actually originated with residents who wrote me about this and who were curious about whether it has an impact on some of their concerns for, I guess I would call it, other forms of work that might affect trees. One is the sense of some residents that at times the work that's done in our annual sidewalk repair process that covers 2 districts at a time per year as we cycle through them all. But a sense that at times the contractor needs to cut roots, take other actions that may disturb the tree, perhaps enough to cause damage. The other one that comes up is the pruning that's done periodically where there are overhead utility wires, and whether there's anything that we're looking at here that might allow us to look at less stressful impacts on some trees.
I'll handle the city question first of the sidewalk replacement. Sidewalks are in proximity to our trees. Replacing or disturbing sites around mature trees especially can certainly have impacts. Anytime that there is a sidewalk slab identified for potential replacement adjacent to a tree, then forestry is involved. We actually purchased new equipment last year, an air spade. So where we were previously physically excavating to try and identify where those roots were, now we can use a high pressure air tool to help lightly excavate around. And then as opposed to speculate on what the below grade conditions are, we can actually see, what roots, what size, how healthy or vigorous are they, and I guess make a prescriptive action around that, whether that's bending the sidewalk, maybe changing the grade of the sidewalk. The sidewalk replacement program as it currently is structured does impact trees though, and we're currently working, actually we've been working even more this year in partnership with the engineering team to try and improve the outcomes there. The challenge that we have as forestry is that a lot of times those impacts are not acutely observed. So, removing roots, probably the most acute situation would be if you removed roots and then the next day we got a windstorm and they toppled over in that same exact direction. Pretty clear to see exactly what happened and why. What happens a lot of times in a tree case is maybe they'll go into stress or decline and they may show signs of advanced decline in the next 3 to 5 years. It's harder to tie that directly to sidewalk replacement when we've also had drought, we may have had flooding, we may have had windstorms and other stuff too. But all of those things, in the industry we call it like a death spiral. So kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back of like one thing, then another, then another, then another. One thing alone isn't usually what does it. But urban trees, especially large ones, they've navigated a lot to make it to that point. But similar to humans, they're less resilient, less vigorous as they age. So doing substantial impact around a large mature tree carries more implications than doing a similar impact around a small vigorous tree. So I think internally those conversations are ongoing. We are working on improving the process that we currently have. And I think that that's a continual opportunity for growth. To the utility side, the utility is not city forestry. They're pruning to the industry standards of utility maintenance. They're looking to keep the lights on, not have things fail and damage their infrastructure or pull lines down and make things unsafe for the general public. I don't recall offhand their pruning cycle, but I believe it's something around 10 years. And so similar to our city trees, if we were on a 10-year cycle, not only are they addressing things once every 10 years, but they're also trying to anticipate the next 10 years to not have to circle back to those trees. So pruning cuts, pruning decisions tend to be a little bit bigger, and kind of having a tree V'd out around a wire is not ideal. But with that being said, we as the city are taking different measures going forward too. Like the trees that are under wires now, we're not replacing large canopy mature species. So we are planting smaller trees. What that means in practice is that we have to identify other sites across the community where we can plant canopy trees, because if we only replant small trees, we are also not going to move towards our 40% community canopy goal. So we do work with the MG&E partners and try and make our operations collectively as efficient as possible, but utility pruning does impact trees similarly. Utilities and trees and people all populate a lot of that same space. So not a specific answer for you, I'm sorry, but I think the point is that we're all trying to be engaged with each other so that those conversations are thoughtful, are engaged, and that so that you, as well as the residents in any given area, have confidence that if a pruning decision is made or a pruning execution is done, that city forestry is a part of that process, has helped to weigh in on the extent of that pruning, or maybe if it was removal, the replacement choice, and messaging that to the surrounding community as well.
Thanks, Ian. The residents I need to respond to will appreciate that forestry is aware of the issue. One other question. What would be the educational process if these amendments are approved? Will that be at permitting or how will that be communicated?
So yes, permitting would be a part of it. DAT would be a part of it. The tree ordinances are in place as already. It's basically things kind of get activated or forestry is brought to the table if someone is planning to work within 5 feet of a tree. This basically just increases that halo, so forestry and our staff are involved more. And so I guess, like I had mentioned before, it's not that we're saying you can't do anything in that halo. It's just, please talk to forestry. So maybe that's, we're talking about, instead of being 5 feet away, can you be 7 feet away? Can you be 10 feet away? Because at that point, every distance matters. Further is better. Do you need to have down a mat of mulch to help avoid soil compaction? Where are you planning to stage or run equipment? Because even the hot exhaust coming off a piece of machinery can basically desiccate the canopy from underneath, dry out the tree. And so what we're looking to do is, after those projects are gone, the trees still remain. When development happens, those locations, I would argue, are much more desirable for whether that's a building occupant or a residential occupant if you have canopy present. So it makes those properties ultimately more valuable, not only to the individual developers, but also to the community as a whole when we're able to retain those big trees in proximity to these same projects. Madison's a growing community. Development and redevelopment are going to happen. We just want to be engaged and supportive of that process on the front end so that it's not... the math that I don't appreciate is we're going to remove a tree and replace a tree that's 1 for 1 and say that that's equal, because it's not. A tree that is, this large that I can hardly reach my arms around is not the same as replacing it with a tree that's the size of my thumb. Those are 2 individual trees, but the amount of community canopy benefits that those 2 trees are delivering for decades is not equal at all. So that's what we want to do, is to just make sure that people are thoughtful in how they're assessing these project sites.
And thanks, Ian. I'm glad you mentioned DAT meetings. I know that those I attend, that forestry is there now. And it would seem to me that that's a very early opportunity to call attention to these issues. There might even be some information there as to tree size even by then. And that would allow the possibility of avoiding a substantial delay because of this ordinance in the whole process.
Alder, I guess this is probably an appropriate time to share this too. Forestry, we're looking at opportunities to reorganize or reallocate our staff to help support projects like this too. Forestry as a whole has historically been geared towards production arboriculture. So what that means is planting trees, pruning trees, removing trees, like kind of doing the labor side of the forest. That will always be a core service of ours, but especially in a community like Madison that is hungry for knowledge, hungry for engagement, hungry for development, there's absolutely a need within the community. You don't plant your way out of canopy loss. The timeline is just far too long. So what we're looking at doing, and the way that I've described it to our team, is I want to grow our forestry team into professional arboricultural services. So if you want to talk about, hey, we need to have a certified arborist, look at this. Guess what? The city has over half of our staff are certified arborists. I need to have someone look at these plans. We have staff, 3 full-time staff that do that, and we're working on developing the skill set of more of our team to be able to contribute, especially in the highest construction season of summer, spring through fall. So we as a team are also not trying to stand flat-footed and expecting everyone else to meet our greatest need. We're trying to evolve to meet the needs of the community, the developers, and the electeds that we serve as well.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me skip the commissioners. I'm sorry, guys. So I have a couple of questions. Just to confirm, is this a citywide policy or a downtown only policy?
This is a citywide policy. To your point, though, I certainly expect the greatest impacts would be downtown. That's where just physical space is at our greatest premium.
And there were mentions about, I'm kind of a little bit confused about how does this complement the complete green streets policy that we just passed last year or the year before?
How does it complement? Is that the question?
Like why is it? Yes. What is different? I mean, what else is added into this that it wasn't covered in the complete green streets?
I think what this actually does, so having the distance benchmarked to the size of the tree rather than have a standard 5-foot distance, that actually mirrors the industry best management practices and recommendations from the International Society of Arboriculture. I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but Madison overall tends to lead the way on a lot of things. But quite frankly, we're behind the curve when it comes to our tree protection zone distances. ISA recommends doing anywhere from 6 inches to 18 inches per inch diameter of trunk. So we're basically splitting right down the middle and we're going with 12. That also makes it really easy to understand. 1 inch of tree equates to 1 foot of distance. Complete green streets also increases those terrace widths and planting spaces. So these two things I think do marry well together. It wasn't necessarily legislatively designed that way, but having greater space, greater soil volume, undisturbed space, especially under mature trees, is reflective of the overall goal of complete green streets too. Having greater space, wider terraces, having opportunities to support mature canopy in and around our other developed spaces and newly redeveloping roads. So I think they are complementary.
So why not just update the green streets? Why create an ordinance just for this instead of just updating the processes we already have in place?
The works for this were actually in progress prior to my arrival, and it was basically the result of the community asking if a large tree were removed on a project, what more can we do? The challenge, I think one way to explain this is, if someone were to damage a sidewalk slab or a section of road, I can report the sidewalk slab and the community is made whole within a week. If I damage a 100-year-old oak tree, I can write a check, but that oak tree isn't going to be 100 for another 100 years. So really what we're working at doing is not focusing on as much of the recovery side, but the protection side. So what more can we do to keep those healthy, mature trees in place, and having more transparent conversations with all parties involved in these projects, we think is a very good first step. Increasing that distance that people are away from trees. So in practice, that 1 foot per diameter inch is pretty close to what we call the drip line of the tree, so where the edge of the canopy would be. So that makes it a lot more likely that equipment is not going to be operating underneath the tree, trying to work underneath big structural branches, aren't going to be spraying hot exhaust up into the canopy. We're not going to be storing.
And I think she's just asking, those are things that were not in the green trees process that.
Okay.
That we recently enacted. Is that true?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that was it. And then the other question that I have is that was mentioned the development assistant team meeting. I didn't understand why wouldn't forestry have a seat at that table currently? Sustainability has a seat, and there's very barely anything that we can actually enforce on that angle, but yet we have someone sitting there representing the city on sustainability and providing options and advantages for developers that they can gain access to, even though we cannot enforce it, they're at the table. So why wouldn't forestry be at the DAT table? I didn't understand that point either.
Oh, no, we should be. We are. We do have staff that attend and represent forestry as a part of the DAT process.
Are you saying that that's not enough to having conversations about trees on that kind of setting?
Correct.
I'm going to leave the floor for the rest of the commissions. I may have more questions later, but thanks for the feedback.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Field, you're next in line.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for joining us tonight, Ian, to speak to these. I heard you mention in response to earlier questions that this change proposes to involve your team, Urban Forestry, more than before. And a registrant brought up the concern about waiting for staff to measure trees or make a determination about the tree's own size. How much more work do you estimate that this would mean for your team? And do you then need to plan for building in site visits or validating information about tree diameter shared by applicants in a way that your team is not currently doing?
The measurement of trees and reporting of what trees are on site is actually, that's on the developer themselves. So they bring a certified arborist to the table, prepare a street tree report that's to be reviewed by forestry. The purpose that we do it that way, as opposed to forestry provides a report to them, is if they're engaged with a certified arborist and walking their own job site and they're looking at it from their perspective, that's their data, it's on their radar. They're coming up with their plan of which trees they would want to work around or which trees are on their job site or not, versus us just telling them. We have had situations where, let's say, a private parcel were acquired, and the approach seems to be like, mentally, it's a blank slate. In practice, that is not what that is. There is a private parcel, which could be a blank slate, but there is right-of-way, public right-of-way that around the perimeter. There could be street trees. Commonly, there are street trees within that same space. So we want to make sure that those trees are appropriately acknowledged, accounted for. So where are they storing material? Where are they staging? Where are they putting the crane? Where they're accessing the job site, how far are they building out, where are they storing the equipment overnight. I've seen job sites where there's literally a piece of equipment with forks that bracket the trunk of a tree, and that's how it's parked. That's far too close. And the tree itself, it didn't die in the course of that project, but we have been constantly monitoring situations like that in the wake of that, because you will typically see trees continue to decline over a series of years, and then we as the city are on the hook to remove and replace not only a large tree, but then we have the canopy loss going forward for potentially decades. So we just want to talk about that earlier in the process.
Yeah, I think the piece that makes more sense to me is the fund and the rationale for and uses of the fund. What would happen if you all disagree with the developer about their stated need to dig within a protection zone or their need to prune or remove a tree for a project?
So so it's like forestry is adamant, yeah, you don't need to do this.
Yep.
We do have situations where forestry strongly advises, prefers that a tree remain, and if the tree is ultimately removed, then it's basically $150 per diameter inch is what would be charged for that particular tree. The reason that other parameters are in place is we have had situations where contractors notified us of that. We have had situations where contractors just removed the tree and then forestry saw that the tree was gone. Either we, through a site visit, came across, well, there used to be a tree here, or the residents said, wait, I thought the tree was supposed to remain. Even after presentations to someone like the Plan Commission or Board of Public Works, the tree is communicated that it would remain, and for one reason or another, it does not. That's a pretty permanent decision, and so we want to make sure that we're doing what we can on the front end to try and avoid that either miscommunication or devaluing of what that tree is. Those funds associated with the tree removal do go to the street tree replacement fund, and so then we would use those dollars to then turn around and improve and repopulate a future site. So for instance, in a downtown site, we may say, like, to replant this, you need to have a Silvacell in place. Silvacell is a trade name, but it's a suspended terrace infrastructure. And so it's not only the cost of the tree, but you also need to pay for that. So that more wholly reflects the cost of what the city would incur as far as trying to repopulate a downtown space on the isthmus in a small, narrow, hard-to-grow site to try and make it better so that the new tree that ultimately gets planted does have an opportunity to reach that canopy level.
Yep. Thank you for walking me through that piece, especially about the funds. So it sounds like then if we remove for a second the possibility of a previous violation that's been found, because I understand then there's a permit issue, staff would not necessarily withhold a permit then in the case for a project, I mean, in the case where a developer insists on proceeding with a removal that forestry determines they don't need to do.
Yeah, forestry's not all, I guess for clarity too, forestry isn't the only voice at the table for these projects.
Certainly.
So, we're part of the city team. That's what we want, is to make sure that forestry is a part of the team that's at the table in these discussions. And we have discussions not only with the developer, but also internally. The city has needs, the city has priorities. It's not always the tree. And I understand that. It's just, we want to make sure that our interests and needs are appropriately fairly at least acknowledged and accounted for in that process. The permit issue, I think for argument's sake, I would say is like, if you had that 100-year-old tree through all of the hearings, the plan was communicated that tree would remain. Don't you worry, no matter what, the tree will be fine. And then forestry comes across the job site and the tree's removed. It was in the way, backed into it. I don't know. We need a process to be able to make sure that everyone on the project understands what that tree means to not only forestry, but also the city of Madison and all the residents that are around there. Because just saying you owe us $3,000 for that tree does not come anywhere close to what that tree is actually valued at, either in the compensatory value or any other way to calculate it. But trying to legally have all of those numbers line up to be the $50,000 mark or whatever that I would potentially value it at is something that's not something that we're able to do. And so that's why we looked at going an alternate route for how do we make sure that people know that we're serious? What are the teeth behind this actual policy? Again, this is not designed to be an enforcement piece. This is designed to be, it could go south, so let's talk about things on the front end. I guess an example I gave was if I like to speed and I have money, I could speed and write the check for my ticket. But if you suspend my license, that in effect does keep me from speeding until I go back and I talk to the judge to get my license back. So that's what we're talking about doing here, is trying to make sure that people that either could speed or have the means, I guess, to not take our tree protection seriously. There are other things in place that would be more valuable than money, time. Limited construction season, want to move things forward. We want to make sure that what the public is communicated to, the folks like Plan Commission, Board of Public Works, elected officials in the neighborhood too, the plan that is communicated to them is what we stick to as a project team.
Okay, I'll yield for now. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Butterfield. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. My questions have mostly been answered, but I think I just need some clarification. First, I'm thinking about the process that you'll go through with a particular development proposal. It sounds like DAT meeting would be your potentially first interaction. Maybe you have a previous discussion with somebody, but the DAT meeting is where you'd be doing some educating, I assume, and making sure that the concerns and the portions of the ordinance that are relevant are part of the record, I guess. And but then I also hear some mention of permits, and before people get to the permit stage, they go through places like Plan Commission and all sorts of other things, potentially. I'm imagining the items that forestry thinks need to be part of a development agreement will be listed, for instance, in a staff report to Plan Commission, similar to other things that sometimes are DAT related. Maybe there'll be 50, 60 conditions of approval, and one might be they have to follow the conditions that forestry has laid out, or they've come to an agreement with, where will there be a separate agreement? I'm just kind of understanding how that will work. That's my first question.
I think one thing that we hope to gain through this process too is if forestry is a part of those conversations more regularly, not only are we protecting the tree and specifically the root zone underneath the tree, where it's a lot harder to tell what your impacts are, but they're definitely there, is that when there are tree impacts, certainly tree removals on a project, that the developer as well as the city team can competently communicate. Yes, forestry was engaged in this conversation. Yes, forestry approved this process, and this is why. I'm not saying that every tree in the city needs to be saved, or even every tree is worth saving. There are trees with advanced decline. There are trees that maybe they're small, or we could improve the site in some other ways. I have personally had conversations with potential developers on basically the layout of a building or a parcel essentially necessitated the removal of one large tree. Well, we talked about what else could we do on that parcel that would improve the overall canopy space around the perimeter of the parcel, whether that's multiple silvacells or activating green space that's currently paved or other things. And so it's not wholly to the one tree, one site, one place. Is like, how do we make these projects be supportive of our overall community canopy goals? How do we help make them a part of our overall City of Madison goals? And forestry is a part of that conversation, and so I think that's what we're looking to do.
But where can we learn about what the negotiations were, what the result of the negotiations were for a particular project?
Run that by me again. So where do you learn?
Yeah, as a potentially approving body for
So if they were to come, I guess before the Plan Commission or Board of Public Works, within the project layout to say that this tree is removed, and these are the things that we're doing on, tree removal is step one, but then step 2, 3, and 4 are how we make the city whole with forestry's approval and guidance. Or maybe these are the things that we're doing on the job site to protect said tree. We're looking to help developers actively do a better job of protecting trees. So to not just say, we promise we won't disturb it, but we promise to not disturb it, and this is why. We had a professional arborist from forestry that came to our meetings and helped guide us through that process. What do trees need? What is effective tree protection look like? What is the distance that tree protection needs? So I'm hopeful that developers will actually, I guess I don't want to say get cover, but I'm hoping that they'll get support from our broader community when they know that they're not doing things in spite of forestry, but they're doing things in support with forestry.
Sure. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that approving bodies would have I know now we get drawings that say red X for trees being taken out, but that's kind of it. So you think there'll be more information potentially available?
The plans that I've seen from our team would have the red X, but they also have a comment bubble for like what size tree, the type of tree. And then on the side, there would also be, or maybe in the bottom of that same plan drawing would be what was being done as a result of that. So like the Historical Society building, we did approve removal of a number of trees around that development site. But there are plans in place of how those very difficult growing spaces are ultimately going to be improved when that whole project is done. So that's the type of stuff that we'd like to have out kind of in the public air, so that if something were to come before the Plan Commission that says we're removing 5 trees on this project, that there is a plan in place and that forestry has endorsed the plan or at least been engaged in the conversation. If there were a point of disagreement, we could certainly talk about that to say, like, this is the plan that's proposed and this is what forestry, the counter was, and this is where, we had arrived at. But again, those are conversations that aren't consistently happening now. There are some really good developers around the community. We have standing relationships with those individuals, and we do really good work. One thing that we do need to get better at is it's not only the project manager, the company owner, the site superintendent that are those are the ones that we know on a first name basis. there could be 200 individuals working on that job site, and it takes one of them to back over a tree. So we want to make sure that anyone, even if it's the person who got hired 2 weeks ago and this is their first job, fully understands the impact that trees carry within the city of Madison, and to make sure that everyone on the job site, whether working for a developer or a member of the city team, is on the same page of what the job site expectations are.
Okay, thanks. And then quickly, a second question. As a former downtown alder, I know that in these tight spots, things happen unexpectedly, not just running over a tree, but maybe the contractor discovers, oh, I guess we can't get our lift between the tree and the building, and there will need to be occasionally some flexibility, more real-time post-permitting. And I know from experience, I worked with past city forester on those sticky situations, but the sort of agreement could be modified if they need to take out more trees on the fly, right?
Correct. So
Okay.
again, there's a compensation for that. That's what the Street Tree Replacement Fund is for. But our hope, our plan is that fewer of those conversations would happen, because the size that we're talking about here is, if it's a 20-inch tree, they need to stay 20 feet away. So now if last minute they need to get within 15 and I can approve 15, that's fine. We'll make that decision, we'll move forward. That's very, very different than the current 5 feet, and now they make a decision on site that they need to be within 2 feet. 2 feet I'm very, very nervous about. That's probably going to cost us our tree. So I think in practice, kind of just having a halo that more accurately reflects what the industry best management practices are really gets trees talked about earlier in the process, and we can do a better job. So even if we're flexible, that's something that it's still a good situation for the trees, even though the project itself has morphed. And we all know those projects do have the potential to change in live time.
I like your optimism. Thank you.
Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, Ian. You mentioned earlier kind of, acknowledging that not every tree should be saved. Condition comes into play. I don't really see condition referenced in this as a factor. And, specifically, I was thinking of it in the section related to driveway locations, where it talks about, no driveway should be located where an existing tree is unless no other location exists. And to me, that seems like very strong, and not taking into account the fact that perhaps there are trees of poor condition in an area where the driveway location is most logical. And you may say, well, this is all part of what's, reviewed and negotiated, but that statement itself seems to be very strong and not really account for maybe the flexibility that we're looking for.
I'll acknowledge that the language may not be as flexible in practice. It is quite flexible. So, if it's a healthy tree. So for instance, we are not discounting ash trees. We have a successful ash treatment program. So I have had people say, well, aren't they going to die from this emerald ash borer thing anyway? And I said, no, they're not. We have a solution for that. But if it's, let's say a small stature tree, it could be a Japanese tree I like, it's under the wires. That may be, it could be a tree this big around, so 4-inch, 5-inch diameter. It's not going to get a ton bigger than that. And so those are situations where, we have been very flexible to try and say okay, that's reasonable. Maybe it's a declining Norway maple. Are there opportunities to impact a tree that we care less about versus save a tree that we care more about? Those are the types of things that we're wanting to have conversation about. I feel confident that we currently are. We actually saved a mature ash tree in the Greenbush neighborhood that was subject to a driveway permit. The driveway ended up being angled and staying away from the tree. So I guess without being expressly documented, we do exercise professional discretion on those things. I think the loophole that I'm trying to avoid creating is an opportunity for someone to exploit something because it's written down in a particular way. I want to give our team the latitude that they need to be able to provide the guidance. So the ones that are primarily reviewing these plans, they're certified arborists. And those are 3 folks that we have full-time on staff, and a lot of what they do is work with developers and reviewing plans, doing site visits in the field, and building and maintaining relationships with the people that are working in and around our trees. And so I think that those things happen even though it's not explicitly described within the text like you're asking about.
Okay. Yeah, I think that could be maybe reworked a little bit to account for what you just described. A few other questions. This may be a silly question, but the 5-foot tree protection zone and that minimum, is that 5 feet the diameter? Or I know it refers to the diameter measurement, but I can't tell from the definition if 5 feet is actually the diameter of the zone or the radius, or
It's a radius. So like if you're measuring so trees, mature or growing trees, once they're out of the nursery, they're measured at 4.5 feet off the ground, and you take the diameter of the trunk at that space. So the diameter of the trunk in inches, you can think of taking a straight line measurement going that far away from the edge of the trunk of the tree. So like there's a little fudge in there, especially when you get to be, large trees. Am I talking about the center point of the tree, or am I talking about the edge of the root flare? We're talking about like basically the edge of the root flare, like to stay that far away from the tree. So if it's a 30-inch diameter tree, 30 feet radius.
okay. Yeah, I think that just needs to be clarified that that's radius. And then you mentioned like a potential 15-foot zone, which to me now I'm thinking that is a very large area and likely at that point spilling over. So if it's a tree just on the, next to the sidewalk, that area, that zone is now spilling over into what is the, private property. So is that is still a space under this proposed ordinance that cannot be disturbed, even though it's not in the right of way? Is that correct?
No, right. Our limit, legally our limit is right of way.
Okay.
We are protecting right of way trees. Now, that's not necessarily exclusive of other stuff that might happen on that site. So if they're doing a private residential home, for instance, if they need a right-of-way occupancy permit, a driveway or a terrace permit, an excavation permit, there are other city permits where we can have trees involved and engaged in the conversation of whether that permit gets approved or not. That was the case with this tree I was describing in the Greenbush neighborhood of we weren't that wasn't a matter of a tree protection zone violation. That was whether the city team was approving as drafted or as requested the driveway installation permit. And we had the tree considerations basically accounted for, and the driveway became angled instead of being straight as a result of our request. So we are looking to have forestry still involved in like the other permits that might come up. But if you had a 15-inch tree and it was within 10 feet, the last 5 feet of that distance away from the tree was within your private property, you could do whatever you need on your private property without involving the city in that.
Okay. I know the ordinance is specific to the right of way, but I do think that could be clarified in the language to understand that the zone is only applicable in the right of way. Sorry, one last question. You spoke earlier about, the language regarding withholding, or, revoking or withholding a future permit. That I think is in the street occupancy permit section. So when we're talking about withholding or revoking a permit, that's specific to the street occupancy permit and not, say, the general building permit. Is that correct?
Correct. So, no one has to pull a right-of-way occupancy permit. They could do everything that they need to do within the private property side of things, especially in downtown sites. So they typically want to maximize the amount of built space within that private property, and so they'll utilize the public space. There, I think I'll paint the worst case scenario. You had someone who's not respecting the tree or respecting the city's outline or wishes. they think that they're going to write a check and just make the city whole. And so in that case, we're going to say, no, you offender have changed what our agreement was for moving your project forward, and we're going to make you go back and talk to BPW to say, like, why is the tree that you initially said would remain is now gone? What changed? Why did it change? Was this a mistake? Was this I didn't care? But how should that have been handled differently? Because we can't just put the tree back. Even the money that they are paying the city as a result of removing that tree is not really making the city and our residents whole for that canopy loss. And so that's the purpose of that permit, is to make them kind of go back, explain to the broader through the broader public process why, how could they have done better, what exactly happened there. But those things take time. I recognize that. To me, the intent is no one wants to have delays in their project, and so they'll take as many steps as necessary on the front end to avoid that. And what that looks like to me is those trees are accounted for, forestry is tagged in, and we're a part of that conversation to help guide that process so that we don't have to have the whoopsie conversation at some later date.
Okay, thank you. That answered my questions for now.
Thanks. Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks for all the info, Ian. I've got a couple more clarifying questions about how this interacts with Complete Green Streets. So the first one is, we've talked mostly about private developers. I'm curious, in the case where the city is doing some sort of project in the right of way, maybe a sidewalk, and hires a contractor to do that work, what kind of protections does this provide for the trees?
It would be similar. That's kind of an internal conversation at that point, but it's still like the same tree protection zone, same distances, same negotiations and conversations. I will say that our communication with engineering has been flourishing, and we continue to look for opportunities to engage and grow on what we're able to do and deliver, both from a building perspective as well as from a supporting perspective. Building meaning the engineering project, and supporting meaning the tree and the tree canopy. The engineering team has been very flexible and helpful in improving our tree sites. They've included in their general specifications site improvement characteristics, as well as embraced putting in things like suspended terrace infrastructure on projects where requested, or even piloting. We're talking about with the John Nolan Causeway project, we're piloting 3 separate treatments to look at what they do both for stormwater as well as the tree canopy. So yes, those conversations would happen internally as well, but the pattern of our communication between forestry and engineering and any other city partners too has continued to grow, even in the 2 years that I've been in the chair. I'm not sure how those conversations went before I arrived, but I'm really impressed with how things are handled now. I'll share with this committee too that Jim Wolf, as the city forester, is the most understanding engineer I've ever worked with. And so that gives me great confidence entering any conversation that we're not ever coming at things from a point of disagreement. We're coming at things from a point of maybe a misunderstanding, or we have opportunities for growth and learning. As he described it, he'll always show his work. So if he needs to take a tree or needs to go in a particular way, he'll show exactly why. I'll outline the things that I think that we need for the tree, but we've always been able to reach a point of agreement. And so I do think very highly of the city engineering team and what we've been able to accomplish so far. And I think that this is going to give us even greater tools to work and improve, and quite honestly lead the way to show that city engineering and city forestry can work together to identify great outcomes. So why can't we do that with private partners and city forestry to identify great outcomes? So I think that that's something that will be really great for us to be able to do.
That's great to hear. I guess maybe a sort of specific example, I'm wondering how you've worked through, if at all, so far. A lot of times on these construction projects, private development or otherwise, we're having challenges rerouting pedestrians around these these sites, and I think we got a written comment about this. Have you worked through any sort of creative solutions with city staff in cases where maybe you were trying to protect this very large radius around a tree while still maintaining pedestrian access through that space?
I have not. I won't say that our team hasn't. So that hasn't come to or across my desk yet. But I think that those are things that can be accounted for. If it's temporary access, even through like a tree protection zone or a root protected area, for instance, something like foot or bicycle traffic is relatively easy to protect against, meaning if you put down a thick mulch mat, that helps to distribute the weight of the people transiting underneath, and then you can just either scrape that off or move it in as like a mulch ring later once that project is done, and that has protected the roots that are underneath that space. So again, I'm not sure if that's how things have been handled in the past, but those are the types of solutions where, if there were a temporary routing that had to go by a large tree, I think that those are things that we could certainly accommodate within this plan. It's basically just getting forestry to the table so we can provide the professional guidance of what that tree needs.
Okay. And one last question, just so I make sure I understand this right. All this applies basically to how to protect trees that we have decided to protect. Complete Green Streets often is about trade-offs, and including like, do we keep this tree or build a sidewalk? The way I read this, these new policies won't affect that decision at all. Is that correct?
No, there would be some potential, additional compensation. So if the decision, even with forestry's blessing, was to remove the tree, replacement of the tree is something that we're certainly looking at. So, we don't lose the plantability of that site. But let's say a sidewalk goes in, a terrace still remains, but maybe it's a narrower terrace space than what it once was. We might specify that the cost of that would be, you need to have a silvocell there now where there once wasn't. Because we need to have the soil volume to be able to support a future canopy tree. When we talk about city projects, that's something that engineering has been understanding and supportive of. So, we don't have city engineering fighting city forestry whether we're going to do a suspended terrace solution or not. But they understand the permanence of the canopy, the mature canopy that we currently have, the need to plant small trees in good places if we have a hope of future canopy. And yeah, I guess I don't know if engineering's on. I'm not trying to just show off to them, but I think they are really good and thoughtful about what they're doing.
Okay. I think that makes sense. I guess my concern would be that that this rule provides another lever for the public to come out and oppose a sidewalk. And I don't think it's doing that by what you said.
No, I guess that's no good deed goes unpunished. Trees within Madison, because we do love trees, also can be weaponized on projects. So we'll say, I really love the tree. Please don't remove the tree. But the underlying message, or the real message, is I just don't want the sidewalk. We still will be working with our city partners, with development partners too, identifying the overall community needs, the overall community priorities. For instance, we lost some trees that were related to bus rapid transit. We're not saying that trees stop everything. It's okay, we did need to remove some trees. We put in a multi-use path. What can we do along those spaces to make sure that the riders of that path are now going to have future canopy opportunities? Yes, I'm sensitive to the weaponization of trees. I'm hoping that does not come up more. But this basically puts additional tools for conversation on forestry's plate, but it doesn't mean that forestry is just saying you can't do anything. This is an exclusion zone. This is a let's talk about it zone.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Sanders.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to offer Arborist Brown a little break. I have a question for Director Tuttle, just to try to help me understand how the impact of this ordinance kind of hits the ground with what Plan Commission does. I understand that the proposal here that this revocation of a permit really is a method of last resort if things really truly go poorly. But do other city departments have the ability to revoke a permit and reroute things through a process after Plan Commission has approved them?
Any opportunities for revocation of a permit would have to be specified within the specific area of MGO that relates to the issuance of those permits. As it relates to the Plan Commission's purview over certain projects, the main lever that the Plan Commission retains over approvals, I'll say, is through the conditional use process. So you retain jurisdiction over conditional use in perpetuity, and items can be brought back to the Plan Commission if there are violations of those conditions in certain circumstances. But more often, the kinds of permit revocation that Ian is referring to have to do with the specific permits that get issued after a Plan Commission's approval, and any methods for that is specified within the MGO.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Wisniewski.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Ian, back to you. Most of my questions are already answered, so thank you all that preceded me for being so thoughtful in this. But my concern, or at least what I just want to put on your radar, I've heard you mention, working with developers. I'm part of a group of citizen developers, or an up-and-coming group of citizen developers that don't have the savvy. They haven't been through this before. What would you have in place? And I'm not saying you need to have it, the minute the thing goes down, but to help people, if I wanted to put an ADU in my backyard as a citizen, so that I'm not in a gotcha moment, and caught later on, but things I can think about in advance. Do you have something that you're thinking about that, checklist or something that goes on a website, or things to consider that would just help that process in the total planning rather than kind of get caught at the end?
Yeah, I may tag in Megan or planning staff on this one too, but my understanding is that there is a land use permit application. Our street tree impact report is a part of that. So our intent is not to have you having to gopher around all these city websites and find each and every little piece of paper that you might need. We would like all those things to kind of be included. So if you go to the one place, all of the things are listed in there. If you're not impacting a street tree, then we don't really have a voice there. Certainly as a forester, urban forester, I'm hoping that people are considering the canopy that's in their backyards. The vast majority of the land area within the city of Madison is privately owned. And so again, when we talk about community canopy goals, I can model all I want on on public property, but I'm not going to be able alone to get us to 40% canopy cover. So, I think through the land use permit, there's a street tree inspection permit, or basically a street tree permit, impact permit, that you would be working with a certified arborist. And the intent there is you're walking the job site, or they're walking the job site with you to say, these are the trees, these are the species, this is their condition, this is their size. That's provided to forestry. And basically, on that report, you're saying, are we going to impact these trees or not? Are we going to remove these trees or not? And so then we can have a more directed discussion of, okay, you described impacting the largest healthy tree on the job site. Do we really have to do it there? Or you're describing impacting the smallest, crummiest tree on the job site. Okay, did you make the choice to go through that one to save this other one? And so that we can be understanding as well as supportive as those projects move forward, so that if anyone were to ask, whether that's an elected, a neighbor, or a member of a commission, okay, what trees were removed, how come, how many, we can say together that we were in communication with this. You ran this through forestry, worked with our staff to come up with a comprehensive, thoughtful plan that we agree it serves not only the best outcomes for your project, but also for the community canopy potential.
Thank you.
Commissioner Solheim. I'm actually sorry, Darren, does that answer your question?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great. Commissioner Solheim, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, just one more question because it was raised in some of the public comments. Obviously, it sounds like your team has, engaged with contractors on site and developers. Did you engage any of them when you were drafting this ordinance, or have any discussions about some of the implications and get any input on this?
Did not specifically, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Megan. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak to one part of the question that Commissioner Wisniewski asked, which is also that several times tonight, the DAT or the Development Assistance Team has been referenced. And I know Ian has said this, but forestry is certainly among the agencies that participate in that process, which is, if you don't know, is an informal review opportunity that's voluntary for folks who are thinking about submitting an application to the city. A lot of times this is where big projects like what eventually come before you and other boards and commissions will go and ask for that early guidance from city agencies about things they should be thinking about. But projects of any size are welcome to attend. And we do see people that opt to use that forum for projects that ultimately may not even come across your radar. So just want to note that I hear your question, and at the highest level, the DAT process is one thing that we're trying to do to create more upfront information and awareness and interagency coordination. And there are lots of other opportunities that we have for improving our proactive communication to people who are participating in city processes about how all these things are connected. So thanks for the spirit of that question.
Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I have a follow-up to one of Commissioner Solheim's questions about where forestry's jurisdiction on this ends. I'm thinking about, let's say the right-of-way ends at the inner edge of the sidewalk, and you've got a very large canopy tree crammed in between the curb and the sidewalk. Maybe it's 15 feet is what radius, and that extends a great deal over private property. Will the contribution to the fund be based on include the part of the canopy that's the calculation, include the part of the canopy that's over the private property?
Yes, it would. I mean, we're measuring the size of the tree. So what you described as a tree crammed in there, I would describe as a survivor. I would guess that sucker was around for long before the rest of that development happened and kind of grew up around it. But yes, if we're talking about like removal of that tree, it's based on the diameter of the tree, so not just necessarily where the canopy extends to. If there were disturbance not impacting the right-of-way space, then we wouldn't necessarily be specifically a part of that conversation through this process. If they were asking for a permit, we certainly would insert ourselves into the conversation for that. But, excuse me, if that were, I don't know, I'm making something up. If they're putting in a retaining wall on their private property, not impacting the right of way at all, and they're going to be excavating a small amount or putting in just some base for the wall, I doubt that we would be tagged in on that.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Ian, I had just one question, and I don't know if I'll frame it correctly, but are there alternatives to having a certified arborist do these measurements? Would someone be able to, do unofficial measurements and follow those rules or put them in their plans, or is it understood that has to be a certified arborist?
No, we're asking that someone be a certified arborist, so that's an industry credential that can certainly be obtained and maintained. So you not only have to pass an exam, you have to be in the industry for a demonstrated period of time, and then maintain your credential with CEUs. Being a certified arborist does not necessarily mean you are the best arborist or the most knowledgeable, but it does demonstrate a minimal area of understanding, at least a baseline level of understanding. So we had to draw a line someplace, and experience alone necessarily can't do it. I have a degree from a university. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm super good at my thing, but it meant that I passed enough tests to be able to be conferred a degree. So
Thanks, appreciate that. So I think if we are done with questions, I think the recommended action would be to return to lead with recommendation to approve, or certainly recommendation to approve subject to certain other caveats if we'd like to put those in a motion. I think, yeah. So I think we may be at that point. Commissioner Solheim, thank you.
I'm not ready to make a motion per se, to have a comment if that is appropriate, since no one else is clamoring.
Yeah, I think we can have an open discussion as well.
I think, I commend the drafting of this ordinance, and certainly understand we need to do more to protect our street trees and improve our canopy. However, I did have, a lot of questions going through this ordinance draft, and several points through my questions to be clarified. And I think that, if I had that many questions, I think also people that work in this every day could use some additional clarification input. So I would, think it could be valuable to get some input from outside parties personally before moving forward. So that's kind of where I stand at this point.
So I don't know what the impact would be, but I think I was just going to ask, one option would be to refer to our next meeting on August 25th, which would allow some additional work to be done. I'll just put that out there. I see Alderfield's hand up, so I will not try to second guess what he might want to say.
I'm prepared to move referral to August 25th, though, to recommend re-referral to the Plan Commission on August 25th.
So that's a motion from Alderfield. It's seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Discussion on the motion to refer. Alder Glenn.
Yeah, I had so many questions and then they were all being asked, and I agree with Commissioner Solheim that reading it and the language, and as someone coming from a girl who grew up with her dad working for Dane County Tree Service most of her life and has a mad respect for the work and for trees and for this, I just want to make sure we're careful on what we know we also need, which is housing and business and a healthy city all the way around. And so I think it just would be beneficial to find out more, to have more discussion, to be able to look into it and just make sure that the language is clear for everyone. We heard from some people joining in with responses earlier on how sometimes we move and then it's done. And I think this is one of those times we can take a pause and refer it out. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Alderfield?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I want to speak to my motion briefly and just provide a little bit of what I'm hoping can happen in the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to be really important that the folks who have to navigate this process and the changes to the process have a chance to respond to it. I certainly see that this is day-to-day work for Ian, you and your team, and I appreciate your work on this. And I also think that I'm hoping that the sponsors have at least started conversations with stakeholders who need to use this ordinance, and that we can hear from some of those stakeholders before making a advisory recommendation in a couple of weeks. So I'm not necessarily asking for work from staff. I'm hoping that we can hear more from stakeholders and hopefully see some sponsor explanation of what they're going for here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderfield. Oh, Alder Yeager, thank you. Sorry.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favor of the referral as well. Listening to all of the questions and the excellent responses, and I think there's a general comfort level that I hear with the intent of what the ordinance proposal is aiming at. But there are questions about how the process will work and about whether the language could be misinterpreted in the future if it isn't clarified further and so forth. And just a pause here should give everyone a chance to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder Yeager. Alderfield.
Thank you. I have a question about the logistics. It occurred to me that I don't think we have another council meeting between now and the date I mentioned in my motion. And so I am wondering if that means I should suggest that we see this again on September 15th so that the Common Council has another chance to revert back as a matter of process.
Sorry, I'm jumping in there just because I wanted to confirm. So I think in this case, because the Plan Commission is advisory and because your action would not impact the return date to the council, I think it may be okay for you to talk about it again at your next meeting. But if it's okay, if you want to make the motion tonight to refer to August 25th, if there's a problem with that, we can follow up and let you know. And on the 25th, we could refer it to the next meeting.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Megan.
Good solution. Thanks for spotting that. I was trying to remember Ian's schedule as well, and I think, but I think because we're not dispositive, I think that's a great nuance to think about. All right. Any other discussion? Are we ready to call a vote? All right. Seeing none. Any objection to unanimous approval for the motion to refer? We will record that motion as unanimously approved. Thanks for the good discussion, Ian. Thanks for your answers and input and all of your work. Appreciate it. So we will move to item 3. Item 3 is Legistar 89327, authorizing the Planning Division to lead the preparation of the downtown area plan and adopting a public participation plan. This doesn't require a public hearing, but we do have a staff presentation, and so get your questions for staff ready as we listen to Planner Dan McAuliffe and Planner Rebecca Kinnair, and we thank you both for being here. So we'll give you the floor.
Yes, thanks for letting us or having us here today and giving us the opportunity for this presentation. Again, my name is Dan McAuliffe. I'm joined with Rebecca Kinnair. We are the project managers for the upcoming downtown area plan. I'm going to talk briefly about the plan and some of the coordination that we're looking at as part of this process. This occurred at the last Plan Commission meeting, but there was an order change to the planning framework to move the downtown plan forward. This is because of a couple other ongoing processes, mainly the Downtown Madison's Economic Investment Strategy and the Madison Campus Framework Update. So a little bit of primer about that, just to bring it to the. So our downtown is actually the smallest of our framework here. It's about 700 acres, but there's a lot of activity in there. It's 3,400 34,000 residents, which is about 50 residents per acre, 1,600 housing units, and over 60,000 jobs. It is one of our lower income areas. I think that's a lot because of the student population. And also notable that 41% don't have a vehicle. We did do a boundary adjustment as part of, I believe, either this motion or this item or the last item to remove a couple blocks on Park Street from the downtown area plan. They seem to be better aligned with the upcoming near west. Otherwise, it would have been a really kind of a peninsula of the downtown sticking out. When we think about our downtown plan, our area plans, we always kind of go back to our comprehensive plan for some guiding strategies. And there are several guiding strategies that we typically use. There's also several specific mentions of the downtown plan. So these are, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just kind of discussing some of the land use and other strategies that we'll talk about. We think about intensity of development and creating great places, the importance of the downtown economy to the city as a whole, and preserving views of the Capitol and the skyline. So some of our major topics that we're anticipating as part of this process, of course, the land use height and zoning guidance for key redevelopment sites, as well as over the balance of the downtown. Transportation, a couple big things will be curb management, how the area adjacent to the curb, whether it's parking, street trees, additional sidewalk, terrace space, that competition for space that is always present in the 66 feet of right of way. Looking at what the potential could be for an Amtrak station, wherever that could occur. Looking at things like assessment of neighborhoods, how has the downtown economy changed with the advent of work from home? What are historical cultural resources, as well as some placemaking projects as well. As we mentioned, we kind of have a skeleton of a public participation plan, really thinking about 3 phases. The first being the issues, opportunities, and goals, followed by initial draft recommendations, and finally, the review and approval of the plan documents. We continue to try to do some innovative things, learning as we go. We realize we are in a competition for people's attention, and we're keeping with those strategies that seem to bring the largest eyes to this plan. As I mentioned before, we are coordinating with a couple other processes. The biggest one is the DMI's economic investment strategy. At some point, we will definitely call it an environmental impact statement, just because of the shared acronym. But there's going to be a lot of collaboration between the two. We're excited to see how those processes move forward with the shared engagement events, as well as shared analysis. Along with that, the UWM's campus framework plan is being updated, and so we'll see some coordination there. Lastly, we also want to mention we are not anticipating a community action strategy area as part of this. When we look at those lower income areas, they definitely tend to be more student focused, and there's been an incredible amount of redevelopment recently in the area. Moving on more specifically into the DMI's economic investment strategy, is important to note that their boundaries are different than the downtown plan boundary. So in the outline in yellow, you can see it extends all the way across the Yahara to the east, past Cambridge on the west, and down to Olin on the south. So it's a much larger geography encompassing what they're considering to be the greater downtown. Their scope will include an existing condition analysis with a pretty big focus on economic and market analysis. They will then make some strategy framework, including defining what the economic drivers and identifying some potential big moves for the downtown, followed by a recommendation and action plan. So this is how we anticipate the coordinated downtown economic investment strategy and the plan process to work together. We are on the bottom, the private plan is on the top, but we're really going to start off with shared assessments, the existing conditions, kind of all the basically documenting of the existing condition, determining trends, finding kind of the needs in the analysis, then moving into combined engagement before we are contributing to the shared. It's important to recommend or also recognize that we have a big seat at the table, and we're really excited to see how these processes, as mentioned, can work together to coordinate, hopefully on a shared vision for the downtown. So they also will finish up a little earlier than that, and hopefully this will feed into as we move through our recommendations and into our implementation strategies before adoption of our plan. So that is a very brief presentation. Again, this is an authorization, so we don't have a lot to talk about at this point. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Thanks, Dan. Questions for Dan or Rebecca? Commissioner Heck, thank you.
Thank you. Dan, how will this process intersect with, I guess I'll call it the potential implementation of various phases of the Lakeway project? Or will you kind of assume that eventually that's going to be there as you build out the plan?
Sure. As Dan mentioned, one of the things that we anticipate looking at will be that continued access to lakefront and the shoreline. And I would assume that while we are, as staff, are involved in continuous planning for both John Nolan Drive that will be starting next year and parts of that Lakeway, I anticipate that those conversations will kind of be a part of this, but not fully, but we're not going to be making necessarily recommendations because that plan has kind of gone through. In fact, I like to point out that, like many plans before, our previous downtown plan and downtown plans before that have always asked for this Lakeway. So it's really nice this time that we don't have to ask for it. And we're going to just, be there as a sounding board as we hear things for its implementation.
Thanks, Rebecca. That was helpful.
Thanks, Alder Glenn.
Thank you. So, wondering, is there fiscal savings by moving this and working alongside with DMI and Chamber on the project?
No. We are having a pretty small, frugal, I will say, budget for doing our area plans, and we'll be spending about the same amount on this plan as we have the other plans. There was a TIF, or there is a TIF expenditure that used some TIF money from a downtown TID district that is help paying for the DMI EIS effort. So it's an additional effort that we're hoping that we can just, as a client, if you will, of the other DMI effort, we're hoping that we're going to be able to get a lot of information from them and a lot of analysis from them that we can use to, forward this plan. And Megan has some things to add.
Yeah, I think that last point that you were making, Rebecca, was the one that I wanted to touch on, is that we're trying to leverage the work that's being done in the Greater Downtown Economic Investment Strategy to benefit this work that we're doing. And having them more closely aligned in their overall schedule will allow us to do that. While it may not directly reduce our team's expenditures on area planning, it will help us to, leverage that from a staff contribution perspective. Our area plan budgets are very small, and the vast majority of the funding that we have in our budget for area planning is actually directed towards public engagement. And so we want to continue to be able to utilize that to the best of our ability to expand our reach with public engagement. And this coordination will help us to reduce some of the impact on our staff work to do the downtown plan.
Thank you both for answering my question. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Right, other questions? I think this is an item on which the Plan Commission would approve authorizing the project. And so I think that's the motion we'd be looking for. Megan, please. Yes, thanks for clearing.
So this is a resolution that the council will consider. So
Okay,
we
thank
are
you.
making a recommendation on that. Yep.
Oh, thanks. Alder Yeager.
So I will move that the Plan Commission recommends approval to the Common Council.
Thank you. Alderfield, thank you for the second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, we can call a vote. Any objection to unanimous approval for this item? All right, hearing none, it's approved, and you guys can go forth with your work, which we very much appreciate. So thank you for coming out and talking to us about it tonight.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to.
We'll be
continue this-
back.
All right, good. Hold you to it. All right. Those are our numbered agenda items for tonight. So we have member announcements, communications, and business items. If anyone has anything to share. Great. Seeing none, we'll move to the secretary's report.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple quick things for you for this evening. On your upcoming matters for August 25th, you see the first item listed is a tentative Plan Commission member survey. We're not sure yet if that will land on the 25th or at a future meeting, but just want to give you a heads up that one of the things that our team has been working on as part of our Results Madison process, which is a process for us to use data-driven insights in our work, is to share a survey with the Plan Commission about ways that the work that we're producing to support your decision making could be improved. So we will be sharing a survey with you that has a couple questions asking for your input on things like staff reports and other tools that we provide for your decision making. We will also be including in that survey a question about the potential of moving the meeting night for the Plan Commission meetings in 2026. We've been talking about ways to address a couple of things, including reducing conflicts with other city boards and commissions, as well as increasing the amount of time between when a staff report is posted or when the Plan Commission agenda is posted and when you actually act on the items that are on that agenda. And the meeting night is one of the questions that's on our radar for how we might do that. So we'll look forward to your feedback on a number of things in that survey and just wanted to give you a heads up that that's something that will be coming your way soon. The other thing I wanted to mention for the August 25th meeting is that there are a number of text amendments that are listed. We consider these to be in that bucket of things that originate from staff as largely technical amendments and clarifications. So if you have any questions about them, feel free to reach out to either myself or Katie Bannon, the zoning administrator, to chat about them. But we'll be happy to talk about them at the next meeting as well. And you can see upcoming matters. I won't run through that full list, but let us know if you have any questions about those items before those meetings.
Thanks, Megan. Any questions from the commission for Megan? All right. Seeing none, I think we are ready for a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Alderfield. Thanks, Commissioner Solheim. We'll get you in on the second. Any objection to unanimous approval for the motion to adjourn? And seeing none, we'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody. I made it to the whole end of the whole meeting this time, so that's good progress for me and Charter. Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Have a good night.